NetSparker, the developers of a comprehensive automated web security platform that includes web vulnerability scanning, assessment, and management. NetSparker's desktop and cloud-based security solutions employ a unique and dead-accurate vulnerability scanning engine that automatically verifies vulnerabilities and provides a proof of concept. For more information, visit them on the web at securityweekly.com/NetSparker. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. It's the news segment. Quick announcement. Our next webcast is February 13th with Sri Sundaralingam. I think I said that right. Vice President, Product Solutions Marketing at ExtraHop. We're going to discuss cloud-native network detection and response. Register for the webcast by visiting securityweekly.com and selecting even the webcast drop-down menu. Alrighty. And we have our cast of characters back here for Security News, where we have a lot of things. It's a news-packed week. Do we want to start? Where do we want to start with?
Should we get the obvious one out of the way?
We need a lot of drinking. And our audience.
Start with the elephant in the room.
There's a lot. Which one?
Yeah, which one? How about Microsoft?
Let's start with Microsoft. Who wants to go first? The NSA reveals a major flaw in Microsoft's code.
Excuse me, Paul. NSA reveals.
Not the NSA.
Not the NSA.
Semantics.
Semantics. Now is it now?
Shout out to my peeps at NSA.
Now,
Semantics a different company.
NSA reveals versus the NSA reveals. Is it IoT or is it the IoT?
Who knows?
Wow.
So whatever the marketing people decided this week.
Yeah, there we go.
Oh, perfect.
They do reference it as the U.S. National Security Agency has discovered a major flaw in Windows 10 that could have been used by hackers to create malicious software that looked legitimate.
Yep. It's okay to say the if you're saying National Security Agency.
Ah, I see.
Oh.
I will make a note of that.
It's in the Oxford Style Manual, which probably only
NSA
edition still uses.
Yeah. So that's a separate manual, apparently.
Let's dig into the flaw. Tell us what you know.
I had posted some details from Tom Tachek. I don't know if they're current or accurate because it's from 2 days ago.
No, it's Thomas Tachek. Thomas Tachek.
And I love that we have to qualify this as I don't know if they're accurate because it was 2 days ago.
Well, this is fresh, you know?
Yeah, it's very fresh.
We are in a fast-moving world.
So I don't know if you want to start there or not.
Yeah. I love the smell of fresh exploits and vulnerabilities. It has a certain musk to it.
Je ne sais quoi.
Je ne sais quoi, yes.
You're going to make me snort my drink.
Oh.
So someone break down this vulnerability for us.
Lee brought it up.
Oh, shit. Well, let's start with the crypto API spoofing vulnerability that's in, and which
that's what we're talking about.
I expect there's going to be other things related to that will show up because the Microsoft patches are really OS patches, but applications have to also be fixed to address or assessed to see whether they're susceptible to the vulnerability, the way they're implemented, and may have updates. Vendors are starting to send out the all clear. You think so?
Yeah, I do. So the trust chain, right? Like looking at some of the trust chain things and where that trust chain actually falls and what they're utilizing, like who they're trusting with inside of that chain. I think things like firewalls are going to be kind of the next iteration of what's going to fall based on these kind of vulnerabilities.
So there's a vulnerability in the signing in trust of software that runs on Windows, but the software, if you make software for Windows, you may have to update your code to take advantage of the fix, right?
Right.
Because we've seen bugs in vulnerabilities like this in the past, and usually they're bad and take a really long time to fix because even if you apply the patch, will your software break, or will it just not validate correctly, or will it still validate and someone could still spoof it?
And in this case, in my opinion, from the details out right now, I mean, this should be a pretty safe patch to apply, right, for this. If you have to have a maliciously forged certificate, trust chain, and signature in it. Now, it would seem odd to me that somebody would accidentally have a certificates trust chain where the root certificate would have malformed elliptic curve parameters by accident, right? So if people are sticking with the curves, we should have no problem here.
But does everybody stick with the curves?
No. People like to sometimes make their own curves.
Yeah.
Right? There's different debate over whether the curves are safe, who you want to use American or European curves.
But who would do that?
Can you self-curve?
You can. You just shouldn't.
Yeah. But it sounds similar to like wireless and Bluetooth vulnerabilities, right? Where it's up to the implementer as to how they check if something is valid. And if they should trust that connection or not, right? In a wireless protocol sense.
Sure.
Right? We've seen similar kind of vulnerabilities, right?
And in this case, it's Microsoft's API that tried to say, don't all do this on your own, right? Please use one that is implemented correctly. Yeah. Thanks to whoever had the laugh in my headset there. That was nice.
Except for like deadlines and...
Yeah, right. Yeah. But there's one thing. You pass your thing to it and ask it to give you a yes or no answer. And frankly, that's probably the right decision. We don't want every application vendor, right, implementing this.
Mm-hmm.
But
because 98% of them will screw it up.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to do, right? So once you have it, it's actually a fairly simple verification to make sure that the points you were given are on the curve. But what's cool about this bug is it's not that the typical issue here, right, is that the points that you're given by an attacker are not on the curve, and then you can leak details about the private key. What's cool about this one is, although they apparently checked that, they didn't check that the curve they're checking it against is the right curve. And so it's like the second order one, right? And I think that's what makes this a really interesting bug.
But do enterprises enforce that only signed software can run on their systems?
I don't know. I'll turn that over to Tyler.
Depends on the enterprise. Right?
No, that's fairly rare. Although you look at something like what Microsoft has implemented by default with like Smart Screen and stuff, then you're looking at something where they're kind of validating a known or trusted publisher. Whether or not this kind of plays into that, still, I think, kind of in the unknown. As an attacker looking at this, like, if I was going to use this, I would use it to kind of forge the second private key that matches the original key, and then they're not able to validate whether or not that secondary private key is valid or not, just based on the way that Crypt32 DLL is being implemented. So,
I want to amend my answer. Companies only use trusted certificates, but they trust self-signed, self-generated certificates.
But it's not just for signed code, right? This is a certificate issue in which the certificate chain is in question, and so things that do like SSL man in the middle, aka your firewall or proxy, right? Like that's where I think this can get interesting.
Oh, so this is not limited to just signed software. This is also limited to the
TLS connections.
Certificate.
Anything that uses Crypt32, which the browsers were using.
Yeah, some browsers
which I think
have
is
their own stuff.
Right.
But I think that's the more interesting question. Okay, there's this bad vulnerability out there. What does it mean? What does it apply to in terms of systems? Say you're a large enterprise, you've got tens of thousands of systems out there. What do you patch first? Servers, workstations, web servers, all of the above?
Yes.
Yes, yeah. Because what's cool here, and bad for defenders, interesting from an exploit developer point of view is, right, this is in the Microsoft crypto library, and so think if you have a piece of software that's not what we talked about, right? It's not the signature verification for an update or a package install. It's not a web browser that calls into Crypt32. As somebody who's developed a lot of software for Win32 over the years, like if you need to get out to the internet and you're on that, you could either use like libcurl and then struggle with all the things that enterprises put in your way, right? Needing to get the proxy information from Windows and configure your proxies correctly in enterprise networks to get out to the internet. Microsoft offers a really nice library to make this easier, right? WinHTTP. And what does that use under the hood for certificate validation? Crypt32. Right, so it's a lot of enterprise software that's going to reach out to its update servers, to its backend servers. All that is
Does
equally
Microsoft's
effective.
own update service use Crypt32?
I have not seen good data publicly confirming that.
A vulnerability that's always scared me is what if you could spoof a Microsoft update. Obviously, Microsoft puts a lot of time and effort into making sure that is extremely difficult, right? But it makes me beg the question when we talk about this vulnerability, is that in question now?
Yeah.
Certainly in question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have evidence to prove,
No.
Definitively if that's the case, but certainly in question.
But should not take more than a few hours.
Tyler's making a face. I love it when Tyler makes that face.
Tyler, have you popped open IDA and figured it out? This is a simple question to answer.
There are others that have, and I will definitely not call out their tradecraft here, but yeah, this goes way deeper than I think, and it's not just on Windows where the Crypt32 DLL is being implemented. You're looking at anything that is trusting these particular certificate chains, and so. You start to look at TLS, SSL, like the man in the middle, all the proxies used. You're starting to look at firewalls. You're starting to look at particular like OSX things that are required for enterprises. Like these are the things that people are starting to evaluate and not mentioning. And yep. I do think it is funny that if this is bad enough that the NSA decides not to release this particular piece, like. That's either A, it's really, really freaking bad and they don't want to have to deal with it on their systems, or B, this is really freaking bad, but they know of other things that are just as important and or critical that they can leverage from this moving forward. So the fact that
they're good corporate citizens.
Yeah. I mean, the whole release and saying it's a new age and a new era for, vulnerability disclosure for like NSA, like, good on them. I think that's a step in the right direction, but yeah, I'm not falling for that. Like,
well, he still has his tinfoil hat on.
Well, Lee's got a comment in there.
Go ahead, Lee.
So my comment was that to back that up, CISA put out an emergency directive saying all federal agencies need to apply these patches and reply within the next 10 business days. Basically, by January 29th, the entire federal government is supposed to have the patches out there. Makes an interesting twist on Tyler's analysis. Also, there's going to be a shit ton of reporting. I've already got the data calls here.
It sounds to me like NSA has come across a vulnerability that is so detrimental to the security of our nation that it made the decision that, like, look, we're just going to disclose this and make people patch it. Because, yes, we could use this against our enemies, but we'd also be so vulnerable that we might as well get it out there and patch ourselves.
All right, so
because it's so detrimental to our own national security, given the current state with other nation states such as Iran.
And I was just going to say, not to bring politics into this, but thanks, Iran.
But that's not a...
It's not
politics,
outside.
Larry. We're talking about the current state of affairs.
But if you look at like vulnerabilities equities process, which NSA publicly announced their guidelines for in 2017, right? Which technically aren't NSA guidelines; they're whole U.S. government guidelines. The U.S. government has been pretty clear, and I think really has over the years, just never publicly to this extent, been good about saying, hey. This is detrimental to U.S. government systems, detrimental to our companies. We have to prioritize that. And if you look at the statistics, whether you believe them or not, right, by far most of the bugs that are discovered are turned over to the vendors. They're just never publicly attributed. Mm-hmm. So I think I agree with the analysis, right? It's too detrimental. It's the same calculus through VEP. It's too detrimental to U.S. national security and to our corporate, companies that we have to give it.
And it's easily exploitable, right? Like you look at something like Eternal Blue, like they kind of held on to that one. That one was more critical for ongoing operations and what they were doing versus, it would take someone a long time to know a very specific thing within inside of, SMB to come out with the same thing. This, on the other hand, like I see this as a very easy, like you look at all the proof of concepts that have already come out. Like, this was not that hard to build tooling around very, very quickly. And so I think that also probably plays into this a little bit, as far as, they weren't going to be able to keep this, and long term, like, this could be used against us because someone else could find this.
Hey, let me throw in an extra data point, and Paul, you'll understand where I'm coming from. So I checked the plugins database at Tenable, and lo and behold, there are 6 plugins that were issued today. And my search was for the CVE for this specific Crypt API vulnerability. All of them are labeled severity medium.
What?
What?
Well, that's probably not quite right. Or they're testing, or maybe they're testing very specific instances, right? Maybe the case.
I mean, I haven't looked at the descriptions of any one of them. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
they've put out 6 plugins. Again, my search parameter was the CVE 2020-0601, and each one of them are listed as medium level vulnerabilities.
I think it's a huge reason why, as an organization, you need to develop your own severity level for all of the, not just vulnerabilities, but conditions that could exist in your organization that could lead to bad things happening, right? And so if you're listening to some of our host analysis of this vulnerability, right, and you go off and you do some of your own research, which you should, not just take our word for it, validate everything, look at the overall impact of your organization. Likely, I would think for these class of vulnerabilities or set of vulnerabilities that we're discussing, probably is going to be higher than a medium. At least in certain areas of your organization, right? Which is the other benefit of evaluating severity of conditions in your network that relate to security, is going, yeah, in this area, that's where we're going to start. This is really bad. And then prioritize your efforts accordingly.
Related but unrelated, we were having this conversation before the show that was I thought was also kind of terrifying. And then Ryan filled me in a little bit on stuff, but it still also was terrifying, was that we're talking about CVE 2020-0601. That means it's January 16th. And we've had 601 CVEs assigned since January 1st.
I think a lot of those are Cisco, Microsoft, Adobe, and Oracle. Has Oracle released a?
So nothing important,
tomorrow.
Right? Nothing important.
No, nothing people use.
No, yeah.
It's funny. The Microsoft dump, I believe, if I'm getting this right off the bat, started at 0608. Started at 0601 and went up to 0646 on Tuesday, if I'm getting this right off the bat. So it was a productive day for the number counters, right?
Yeah. And then prior to that there was 75 for
I believe
Citrix. Citrix one.
Yeah.
Well, so that still means that there was 525.
I want to put my tinfoil hat on and go back to something Ryan said. You were talking earlier, Ryan, about that. If a government agency, let's say, finds a vulnerability, goes to the software vendor, that may be fixed quietly, right? Is what you were saying earlier?
It may be fixed without attribution to the government agency.
Okay.
So it may be announced publicly, or may not be.
It could be interesting if that government agency said, well, release that to U.S. customers, but not to everyone else. It made me think if that actually happens, right? I mean, in certain circumstances, that could possibly could be feasible.
It would be sort of obvious,
really
though,
idea,
from a software vendor, right?
I mean, Tyler's with me, right? Tyler's my fellow conspiracy theorist.
Now you say that.
Tyler's suit jacket is made out of aluminum. Oh, he took it off. I'm sorry.
Right? That would be fix our own infrastructure so we can continue. I think, Tyler, you were speaking to operations in other countries, right? In air quotes cyber warfare, right? But basically, operators operating in hacking and cyber. There's no way to say that without being sensationalized, right?
It has to be sensationalized.
There are attacks against other nation states that could be preserved, and then protect ourselves if the software vendors could limit that quiet software update and release to our own country and not other countries. But certainly, it's technically feasible.
But think about the system of. But think about the system of all the people in the world who look at patches that are pushed out, right?
Well,
reversing patches to find bugs is a good business for vulnerability research. Actually, debatable if it's a good financial business, but it's something often
Yeah, but if
done.
a nation state like China or Iran or North Korea wants to have a program to do that, I mean, one could probably
Don't
see
you
that
think
happening.
somebody would be like, "Wow, this is a bit different patch than we got over here"? I mean, wouldn't that have been?
They would.
Somebody
flag it.
probably would have caught this.
Yeah,
by now.
I agree.
It'd be easy enough to find, and frankly, having worked with enough vendors who have difficulty patching things, I'd be surprised if vendors could actually execute
That's a great
against
point,
that
Jeff.
effectively.
It's a great
right?
point, Jeff.
It is tough to patch
Unfortunately,
everyone.
right? People should have an idea of their assets that are out there.
But that's
and how they
often
patch
how you
things, but-
debunk a lot of our conspiracy theories, largely coming from Tyler and myself, right? Is that we can't, like in the normal course of business operations, accomplish certain goals. So to like then build in a conspiracy on top of that that's like super targeted for a certain interest of certain groups or whatever the case may be is probably not feasible because Microsoft has a hard enough time just pushing out patches to all of their customers and
Or getting them to
supporting
patch.
Right, yeah.
legacy operating systems or
Right.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
I
not
don't
the
know.
battle
This sounds
we're
like an
fighting.
advanced service that should be offered. I still think this is a good idea.
I know. I agree with Ty. I think it's a fantastic idea, right?
Yeah.
The sad part is, Tyler, it may be a great service, but you may be ahead of your time on that. So you got some time to build this. So
Productize it, get some VC funding.
in like 5 to 10 years when this is really focused.
Platinum subscription-based quiet vulnerability disclosure. I like it.
But this
Hey,
is
Remember back when we all used to know Tyler when, he wasn't this huge success for tool delivery?
Jeff.
Now,
His head's gotten so big. I don't know how much tinfoil he has.
He's
to
gone
use.
full screen.
needs an entire roll of tinfoil now.
I have a different theory on NSA, and it may or may not be valid or real, just because I worked there. But what if this is just more of a PR campaign that all the tinfoil hat theories aside, what if NSA is struggling to find a reason to exist in today's modern world where everything's encrypted and they can't really break it, and it's expensive to do all the other things you do to do information collection? What if they're retooling and reinventing themselves and trying to become a different organization?
Or just lobbying for backdoors in crypto.
Oof. Well, I think we're going to get that to the news next. We'll fix that. But
Boom.
I mean, I think Jeff, you're exactly, or Mr. Jeff for this podcast, you're exactly on point there from my perspective.
Mr. Jeff, just because you seem like you're so young. But,
And we brought in Jeff, who we can't call Mr. because apparently he's goofy and anal, right? I think.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Disney character gone wrong.
there is quite a little bit of lube right behind him.
It is a 55-gallon drum or something. But I think you're right. I mean, if you look at who put this out, this is a new directorate within NSA that's fairly new. Cybersecurity Directorate came out with a press conference, which is not something they're known for. Coming out and saying this is something that we're doing new, right? It's a new organization, a new entity within NSA. And they have many different equities and different legal authorities and different funding streams within
influence
them, right?
to the president to have the president promote that the President Trump is upset with Apple because Apple won't give the government backdoors into iPhones, essentially crypto. And I don't want to make this a political debate, and I don't.
Because many presidents have advocated for this.
Exactly. As
Yes.
we have
Clipper
established
chip.
before the show, right? It was the Clinton administration that was a proponent of the Clipper chip, right?
Absolutely.
And this is the same issue. Regardless of who is in office, regardless of your party affiliation, it's the same issue. And now we've seen it on both the left and right here in the U.S. be the same thing, that the motivation is that the government wants access and backdoors into our systems and into our crypto, essentially, our private keys. And
It's one thing that
cannot
Mr.
happen.
Comey and Mr. Trump can agree on.
Right?
Yep.
It's just a staggering issue that we've dealt with since the late 90s or so, maybe before.
97
I
or
mean,
so, yeah.
Phil Zimmerman, I think, really was probably the first security researcher and person
That
in our
was
community.
earlier 90s, but yeah.
Right? Was that the earlier 90s that Phil did his released PGP and ran into this issue, right?
PGP
Oh, ran into
came
the
out
export, right?
don't quote me, 93-ish time frame.
Well, the export issue is separate from the U.S. government basically wants to be able to see and read everything that we do.
The export control issue is different, yes.
Yeah, and the export control issue is separate from that. But also an important...
feel strongly about.
It's not completely separate. It's we didn't want to put good crypto in the hands of our adversaries.
Yeah.
Right.
I heard Comey speak at some event in the last couple of years, and he sort of gave sort of the constitutional law basis on why the backdoors make sense. And I actually agree or disagree. Actually, what he said makes sense. I don't want to get into it. That's like a whole another topic. But
do a whole episode on it.
A different, I think it was Jeff Jr. that said something about, how the difficulty of companies patching. Case in point, I'm on a call today with a customer, and we're talking about how well their patching program, which is, to be honest, new, coming along, and they were talking about when they think they're going to get their December patches out, and they're testing them to make sure they don't break anything. And given this customer, it really probably could break something, but that's another story. But we got off the call, and then I'm like, no, wait a minute. It was all over the news yesterday with this whole Microsoft thing. My first question was, because I hadn't really had a chance to look at anything, was the patch part of the regular patch release? Because that was just 2 days ago.
Yeah,
it was. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so the next phone call I'm on with them, I was like, okay, guys, I don't want to scare you or anything, but there's this kind of big vulnerability patch fix in the January release. You guys are still looking at December. You might want to start looking at January as well. So this company is like, they're hoping to get their December patches fielded by like early February. And I'm like, you guys got to do this thing on a 30-day cycle because of PCI. Yeah. But also because Microsoft
can we just cut to Lee's camera?
Yeah, can we just cut to Lee? I mean, he says it all right there.
just that camera. Yeah,
it's the double face palm.
Right.
It's double face palm. Thanks. Happy to be of service here.
If there's not enough whiskey in the world for this customer that I'm dealing with.
So hold on. I want to go back to the crypto issue, but I also want to address the patching issue because I think that a 30-day patch cycle is not a horrible thing, provided there are exceptions for things that like this Microsoft patch we just talked about, right? Where that needs to be done, I pretty much immediately, and that's going to vary maybe per organization, perhaps, but there are things that are really critical that come up probably a half a dozen or so times a year where you just need to go patch it and throw everything else out the window like this needs to be fixed, right? Yeah. Having a regular cadence for patching, I think, in today's day and age is not a horrible thing. If we go back to 2003, 2004, I thought it was a horrible thing to say, well, we're going to wait every 30, 45 days to patch because most of the patches released by Microsoft were super critical. It was a different threat landscape, a different environment. If we go through today and we look at the Blue Team panel, right, that we did on Security Weekly, where we talked about how do we defend networks today, we didn't mention patching. I mean, patching was, we mentioned patching because I pointed out during the discussion that we hadn't mentioned patching, and Bill Swearingen was like, okay, well, yeah, people should patch. There, Paul, are you happy? Right? Like, that was the extent of it, right? The conversation was how do we harden and secure our systems above and beyond just patching, because patch the critical things and have a regular cadence for patching, you're good. Most attackers today are not banking on the fact that you're missing a patch. It's usually a configuration or an inherent vulnerability in your system or something architectural that is going to lead to your demise and fall to attackers today.
You actually just got me thinking, and we can put the conspiracy hats back on. Robert Joyce from NSA, Rob Joyce, who used to lead tailored access operations there, spoke in 2016 at the Enigma conference, the cybersecurity conference. And I forget exactly what his talk was, but it was something along the lines of how to stop me, right? And I actually think it's a great summary of what people should actually care about, right? And patching, I'm pretty sure, I have to check my facts here, was highly cited as just patch, guys, right? Like if you're trying to secure your network, there's a few things to do, right? Credential management, patching. I'll find the full list, but
fundamentals.
Right.
Yeah. I know, Rob.
That was the blue team mantra at the roundtable, was just
Patch, implement application whitelisting, remove hard-coded passwords, and legacy protocols.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start there.
If it was easy, wouldn't everybody be doing it?
Fair enough.
But it is easy. It's just time-consuming. So it's not easy.
It's easy and time-consuming, and we got ourselves stuck in these situations where we're interfacing with legacy systems, where we break things,
Goddamn legacy.
Right.
Always.
Yeah.
It's been working for 20 years. Why should I change it?
Yep. Yeah. But I don't think we're saying don't patch your stuff. Right?
No, hopefully we're not saying
Hopefully
that.
we're saying that patching has become an operational thing that folks do, that there's not as much urgency maybe to actually patch software, that many of the vulnerabilities inside of our network or conditions that lead to exploitation are not derived necessarily from a software patch. They're largely derived today from
architecture,
preying on the user, the architecture and configuration, or just fundamental flaws within the system that maybe the patch isn't great, right? There was the Outlook bug that we looked at, the Outlook homepage bug. Mm-hmm. That was like, there was a patch and some people applied it, some people didn't, but it didn't matter because an attacker could still exploit that architecture. That's what attackers are preying on more so. They're playing on default and weak credentials more so because it's way more reliable. It was Ed Scotus, and I want to go back to, I haven't talked about this in the show in a long time. Ed Scotus, I was in a class with Ed Scotus many years ago, and Ed said, look, a buffer overflow attack is basically a controlled crash within the system. And I thought about that. I'm like, that is really prolific, right? Mm-hmm. Why would I, as an attacker, want to try and control a crash within a system when I can go log in with user credentials or replay a hash on the network, which is totally expected behavior across all of my software and systems, where my likelihood of causing an adverse effect is much less than if I'm exploiting some type of vulnerability that invokes a buffer overflow. Jeff.
I've talked for years, Paul, about to my customers and whoever will listen to me. Hackers are much like water. They follow the path of least resistance. Whatever's the easiest way in is going to be the easiest way in. I agree with what you were saying in principle. We've had I think we've had interview conversation, at least news segment items where it was Enterprise Security Weekly a couple weeks ago, and I was helping you host it, and we were talking to Kenna, and they were talking about 95% of the vulnerabilities are discovered, hackers are not exploiting. It's only 5%. Let's focus on the 5%. And I agree with that at some level philosophically. Mm-hmm. You got to cover everything, but the point being, there are a lot of vulnerabilities out there. I don't necessarily agree that they're all. Everybody's got them and they're covered. My current customer is driving me crazy.
Well, and to your point, Jeff, I think there's a minimum level of due diligence you have to do with patching, right? Like if you got 08067 or some of the like really easy remote exploitable, you got to go patch that stuff, right? But above and beyond that, if I can find your keys in your GitHub repository, I don't need a vulnerability in an exploit. I have the keys. It's awesome. And to your point, Jeff, right? I follow the flow like water with a hacker. If I can grab your keys from a publicly accessible S3 share or get the data from an S3 share, why do I need an exploitable vulnerability?
To take that water metaphor a little bit further, hacker like water will take the path of least resistance, but given enough time, it will find all of the ways in.
Yeah. Yes. Well, now
it's gonna seep around and find all the cracks, but it'll find she will find the easiest way in. And
the most water will go in the easiest way.
But now let's take that back to the government's trying to bypass your crypto to potentially violate your rights. And we talk about how it's bad for the government to have access to all of our crypto keys and have a backdoor, right? I agree that's bad. However, they're already similar to hackers trying to go around that. And I, as our listeners know, just finished reading, and I'm way behind on my reading because this book is probably 6 years old or whatever, Kingpin by Kevin Poulsen. Mm-hmm. When Max Vision was arrested for the second time, probably the third or fourth time he got in trouble with the law. I kind of lost track as I went through the book. But when he was arrested in the big arrest that eventually landed him 13 years in prison, right? the federal authorities had moles in the system. They had a lot of intelligence on Macs that they had used other informants to gain, and their goal was to surprise Macs. The sole reason that the FBI knocks on your door at 5 in the morning and tries to surprise you when you're an evil attacker is so that your systems are still on, so that you haven't go turn them off. And the reason for that is when they arrested Macs, they brought folks from the Pittsburgh U.S. CERT, and they were doing memory forensics to pluck Max's keys out of memory so they could decrypt all of his drives. And it was that decryption of all of Max's drives that basically surmounted evidence that was irrefutable in Max's case. They didn't need a backdoor because they had, basically like hackers in our water analogy, right? Found the little cracks and go, if we can get Max away from his systems and they're still on, we can pull the crypto keys, because there were so many cases even before that, even in the past and what we're talking about, where the evil hackers had basically encrypted their stuff and the government didn't have any evidence against them to hold them, right?
Yeah.
So let me try to at least succinctly paraphrase what Comey had said when I heard him speak, and I probably won't do justice, but his basic premise was, from a constitutional perspective, U.S. citizens have rights, but the government also has the absolute right, given warrants and suspicion, due process, and the like, have the right as the government to come into your domicile, the place where you live, search your belongings, search your car, and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking in terms of eavesdropping and surveillance. Certainly the ways that the government has the right to try to figure out whether you've committed a crime and collect evidence has evolved over the years. And that's running into now, for the first time ever, citizens have the ability to completely protect themselves using things like cryptography, and make it possible so that the government can't do the search and seizure, execute warrants, again, with the assumption that it's all legal and the process has been followed. And his point essentially was, the government's still got to be able to do what the government has the right to do constitutionally. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with it. I'm just saying that sort of was the case that he was presenting, that, for 250 years, however long we've been around, the government, and that's evolved, how they do it illegally in terms of entering your residence and your, searching your belongings has evolved. But, the right is still constitutionally, the government is what's really, the main item, the main deal in terms of our country. Citizens, while they have rights, are still subordinate to the government. And what what the government wants, holds sway, and that's a constitutional principle.
You know what? Telescreens for everyone.
Given the nature of that premise, and I agree with you, but given that nature, like, if you are on that list and the government deems you valid enough to burn a 0-day for, within cryptography, or to begin that analysis on you, all of the data and as many people as they're following, tracking outside of the country, like, if you're on that list and that is part of what they're doing, I can see how this should be. I'm not saying they should have access to the crypto, but if they've broken it and they're not disclosing it, then good on them. They're trying to do their job better. And I think that's within reason. You're not going to be on that list or targeted most of the time unless you deserve it.
Now, I may be on lots of lists, but I don't think I'll ever be on a list that requires someone to burn an O-day for me.
Well, if so, you
Not
should
yet.
Definitely get good network packet capture going, so you can at least make some money off of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think the one thing I'd say for this topic is and when it keeps coming up, right? This topic came up in the 90s. It came up in, I think, 2015, 2016 again now this week, which is why we're talking about it. People, Matt Blaze, Whitfield Diffie, Ron Rivest, and a bunch of other people got together in 2015 and wrote a paper, Keys Under Doormats, right?
I remember that. Yes.
And it's like 7 pages or something, right? It's not quite a bedtime story, but it's I'd encourage people to read it because I think they hit on the key points of why this is a really risky idea.
Not the first time in history. The other book I'm reading, just quick book review, right? The CDC.
Wait, are you listening or reading?
I'm listening.
He's listening.
On Audible. And I also get my kids involved as to what they want to listen to in the car, because I take my kids to school not every day, but several times a week. And whenever they're in the car with me.
Always crypto books, right?
Yeah. No, they know I'm going to be listening to, in certain time, not all the time, but now I want to listen to a lot of books. And so I get them involved. And which is hilarious because my middle son, and Jeff knows my middle son, right? He's a joker, that one. But I'm like, so Dean, which one do you want to listen to? He's like, well, Dad, what are my options? I'm like, well, I got this one on the Cult of the Dead Cow. And he's like, what's that? I'm like, it was a hacking group that started in the 80s, like way before you were born. And it's all about them. And actually, a lot of Daddy's friends are in the book and stuff because it crosses over into the Loft. I'm like, when you go to Boston, I was explaining to him what that was, right? And he's like, well, what other books? I'm like, well, I got the Unicorn Project by Gene Kim. And he's like, what's that about? I'm like, well, it's like software development process and creating software. He's like, Cult of the Dead Cow. And I'm like, sorry, Gene.
At least there's beef in it.
Right? So we're listening, and he is a huge carnivore, Dean. And so we're listening to the CDC book. And I'm not a huge fan of that particular book. Dean liked it because they swore a lot in the book. And they swore a lot in Kingpin because they would read the chat transcripts when in undercover FBI and other agents were in, forums, and they would read the chat transcripts, and there was lots of swearing. So Dean got a kick out of that. But now I've started. So quick book review. Really liked Kingpin. And one of the things I really liked about Kingpin that segues into when Max Butler, aka Max Vision, was arrested, to that moment, which the book did a great job of helping the listener or reader visualize, that was Max is in handcuffs, and he previously had known that the handle Master Splinter on the forum was an undercover government informant, right? And he had tried to out that person, and there was a lot of different social engineering to make that, to kind of obscure that fact. And I apologize, I don't remember the FBI agent's name, but his handle was Master Splinter, right? The reason he chose Master Splinter, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Master Splinter is a rat, which I thought was awesome, right? I thought that was awesome. So I loved Kingpin. I thought if you're working in security today, very, very relevant insights into, even back then, the Carter scene, which is not all that different today. Is Visa just issued an alert that magstripe readers on gas pumps are still vulnerable. That was very much a thing, right? So then...
Really?
Right? The CDC book also, it was... I listened and I'm like, yeah, I've talked to people and have friends that were in the scene at that time, and I'm like, I don't know. They tell the story differently than when I'm listening in the book. It turns out there's a lot of blog posts that are saying the same thing. Kind of interesting. Now, the Unicorn Project, which much to my middle son's chagrin, I started listening to, is all in my chapter 2, right? I think it's already so much better than the Phoenix Project. Like whatever Gene and company had learned about writing and really making the reader or listener visualize that, character development taken to the next level, and you immediately are engaged with that and fall in love with the character. The main character is Maxine, and like basically almost midway through chapter 2, if she's not your hero, like just stop reading the book immediately. Like she is my hero. Like halfway through chapter 2, I'm like, oh, like I feel like she's a person, right? Like he did such a great job of describing that person and how she reverse engineered an ODBC driver. I'm like, I'm like, oh wait, this is a book. Like this is fiction, right? He did a great job describing that. So we have a lot of fun listening to hacker books.
Now, my question would be, is she the same archetypical hero female character like in every Dan Brown novel? Like they're all described the same?
It is not the hero's journey. Who was that? Philip something, or I can't remember the person's name. No, Joseph something. Joseph Campbell. Thank you. Joseph Campbell.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Joseph
Really
Campbell
helps there, Larry.
describes the hero's journey, which the best description, if you watch Star Wars A New Hope, that's essentially a hero's journey. Joseph Campbell did the research that basically all of the stories from mythology followed the hero's journey, right? Living in kind of an off-the-beaten-path kind of place, doing a normal job, moisture evaporators and all that stuff, right? You get this call to action, you have a mentor, you become the hero. Like that whole story arc basically is the same story arc in The Goal. It's the same story arc in the Phoenix Project. It is not the same story arc in the Unicorn Project, which is kind of interesting. And
I don't recommend anybody like reading that whole like theory and thesis because it really ruins you anytime you watch a movie or read a freaking book.
I agree, Tyler, because I did start to go back and listen to Joseph Campbell's work, and it does ruin every. It's because you're like, oh, they just basically copied.
Here comes the conflict. Here comes the decision.
And they have to go training, and they're reluctant to go into the new journey. Right? It's every single aspect of that.
It ruined every movie.
It ruins pretty much every movie, right? But the Unicorn Project takes a different take. Some of the same characters from Phoenix Project. Gene Kim is coming on the show this month, and I'm very, very excited to have him on the show to talk about it.
So what else we got for news?
Yeah, other news stories.
What other news is there?
Pussy Cash adult webcam data breach. You had me at cash.
I had to put that in there.
Of course you did. And Tyler put it in the Slack channel too. So
it's on the wiki.
Yep, twice.
I'm not the only one that fell for. Thousands of adult webcam models have had their intimate details exposed online.
Not like that.
Well, I mean, they are essentially exposing themselves.
But it got worse.
It's an S3 bucket, and not like it's 20 gigs, which is huge. That's a lot of video, right? But
potentially depends on the quality, Tyler.
How much? I don't know. How much money are they making off of 20 gigs of data? Like that's a free tier on S3, right? Like someone's making a lot of money.
Yep. But think about, even if it wasn't video, the other types of information that included there was, like names, addresses, metadata, social security numbers, passport numbers, pictures of licenses.
It's a legitimate business.
But in all seriousness, I mean,
credit card numbers, full, Jeff, PCI.
They are exposing themselves online to make money. Hopefully in an agreeable, like legitimate way, right? And I don't know if there's any
fully
details. Consensual, right way.
But they didn't agree to have all that other stuff shared about stuff,
right? Yeah, they're probably not wanting their friends and neighbors to know that they're doing that.
They probably didn't want their friends and neighbors to know. Yeah, and they probably didn't want their friends and neighbors to know their passport number, pictures of their licenses, and their full credit card numbers.
Because these could be like everyday business people. These could be people that have legitimate even clearances at this point, like
school teachers.
This data set is a very interesting one from a.
But why are they storing that? Well, it really why do you need to store that? I mean, you need to validate if the picture of the license is to validate that the person is of legal age to be doing this, which obviously you should do, right? Why do they need to store it? Like once it's validated, do you need to store that data? Can you just throw it away?
Or sometimes do you wonder, does a paper copy work? If you need to store it.
If you need to store it, paper copy maybe.
Yep.
Sure.
And you think about that, in all of the movies that I've heard about on the internet, they all say in the beginning, or at least you've told me that they say in the beginning, we filed all the paperwork to verify that everyone's 18. Maybe they need to retain that data.
Right. To Ryan's point, do you need to retain it digitally or can you retain a paper?
Right.
Why do we use computers?
But 20 gigs is a lot of paper.
That's true. It's a lot of paper. But it goes back to credit cards too, Jeff, right? I mean, this is similar issue that we had when PCI was being developed. And it was, I think, a big issue, right? You don't need to store all those credit card numbers. If you don't store it, that means people have a much tougher time stealing it. It means you're much less of a liability to leaking that data. I don't need to store that. But my fear is when we look at, does Amazon really have the largest store of credit card? I mean, other than the actual card providers themselves, many people store their credit cards in Amazon to do regular purchases. Do they really store the most credit card data? Jeff, I wanted to ask you about this. Might as well do it on air, right?
You might as well.
Is Amazon really one of the largest holding the largest store of active live credit cards of individuals?
Given how large they are, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I don't know definitively the answer. I don't know if they're, playing tricks by storing tokens instead of the card data. I assume, I'm sure they're encrypting the data as it's being stored.
Well, I would think they would have to, because they're not just storing it for people who shop on Amazon, but also for people who use their Amazon AWS services, right?
Yeah.
So now you're even like the net is even much wider of the
corporate cards
of the credit cards you're storing, right?
Well, take it a step further. All the people that are storing using the S3 bucket or AWS EC2 instances for their credit card processing or their backend web app or whatever service is processing that data,
right?
Like that's where I think the majority of like the big risk is people aren't doing that. Cloud security is going to be a huge thing. I mean, that could
years. That is the potential to be one of probably the most prolific data breach in our history, without question.
And you guys wonder why I keep harping on PCI.
I think you have, Jeff. I think you have valid points. Yes,
it's everywhere.
Yes,
everywhere.
But you imagine, since there hasn't been a breach, right? Quietly,
that we know of.
There's a team or set of teams at Amazon that's doing a fabulous job of protecting that data. And that's something we don't always talk about. We tend to harp on the people like this adult webcam when there is a breach, right? Yeah. And I think it's an opportunity to say that.
Is this kind of like the, Sports Illustrated, when they put the team on the cover, they always lose? We're talking about them on the air, and Amazon's going to be breached in the next week?
Damn it, God, I hope not. I really hope
same. Because Paul put all of his credit cards in before the show.
Yeah,
all of them.
Because I'm going to have to replace every credit card in my wallet. Like, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I was at Amazon this past fall. They had me come in and speak at their internal crypto conference, and they had a couple people there, a couple hundred people attending, because they have a couple hundred people that are either actively working cryptography or interested in it within Amazon.
Yep.
And I was like, holy crap, I haven't seen this many crippies since my NSA days.
Right.
Literally. I mean, not even close.
Did you say?
But that's a great point.
Yes, he did.
But that's a
crippies.
But Jeff brings up a great point.
They don't make eye contact.
Holy crippy is the crapple.
Let me finish my point, Paul, and then you can comment.
Yeah.
It occurred to me, Amazon, in terms of their revenue, in terms of their size, they're nation state size. I mean, they're larger than a lot of countries in terms of.
Isn't a school district bigger than New
York? Their revenues and their resources.
Yeah.
North Korea.
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost as big as Walmart. Not quite though, but.
Walmart's
the world's
online
retailer. Presence arguably is not as much as Amazon.
It's not as good, but they're
I don't know about that.
Brick and mortar. They're the world's largest retailer.
Agreed.
Yeah, I mean,
they have an amazing IT team.
Yep.
I have worked for Walmart in the past in a PCI capacity, and I've been to Bentonville, and they had a sign in front of their headquarters where they were like counting up, how many transactions they'd done in a day or how many dollars they'd made in the day. Walmart is a level 1 merchant in PCI terms, which is 6 million Visa transactions, for example, a year. They hit that, at least they did when I was there. I'm sure they're still doing it by like mid-morning every day. Wow. That's how large Walmart is.
They are Fortune 1. Like, there's a reason they are Fortune 1. It's their
they
team
dropped off for a little while,
but it's a great ode to the teams at Walmart and Amazons of the world that are protecting that data. And it's certainly the book Kingpin made me realize like how important it is that we protect that data, because if it's loosey-goosey, man, it's going to be traded on the dark web.
Was that a Pussy Cash reference?
Maybe.
So that kind of goes back to from Social Security standpoint and or credit card standpoint, like at what point in this global economy and or the United States economy are we going to get away from something that was not designed to be a authentication or validation or verification piece?
Never.
Like Social Security is never going to be there. Like,
Not
how do we get
anytime
past
soon.
that and look at like some of the other countries that are building frameworks around cryptocurrency or like even identity, where the social security number doesn't matter, passport doesn't matter. Like, these are all tied cryptographically to a specific, algorithm or within inside of a country identity.
Yeah, it's
like,
it's a great point, Tyler. And a listener wrote in late last year and talked about how we were talking about passwordless authentication and how many countries, I forget if it was Finland or Norway,
Yes.
Finland or one of the, and I apologize because I got those confused.
I want it to be Finland.
I want it to be Finland too, but I feel like
Say
it was
Finland
just
for now.
Finland for the sake of it. Finland or Norway had it implemented, and other countries have, right, Tyler, to your point, this passwordless authentication very much based on crypto, right, that without a password is validating the identity of citizens in that country so that they can gain access to resources within the country, also do transactions in a financial sense based on this. And there have been flaws. We covered flaws in it. The flaws are very quickly fixed, thankfully, for those living in those countries doing that, right? And I think that's an important model for us in a global sense to learn from.
And I want to clarify, crypto meaning the type that Jeff used to do at the NSA,
Like real cryptography.
or blockchain.
Yes.
No, like
Yes.
cryptography. Crypto means
Yes.
cryptography.
Yes, thank you.
And we need to have shirts printed to
I
say
use that in the most general sense of the word as to not take flack from our listeners and hosts on the show.
All right, Larry, I'll take the flack.
Somebody's got to
just
bust your
because
balls.
you're doing it on a computer doesn't mean it's 100% foolproof.
No, that's true. That's
Just
true.
just build a better fool.
Well,
There's that.
problems between the keyboard and chair.
Oh, we can't get out of this segment without talking about how Cisco has addressed a bug in WebEx.
Okay.
Ryan or someone, I think you talked about how the ease of exploitability of the Microsoft flaw that we covered in the top of this segment. When I looked at the code for remote exploitable Netscaler servers, I was like, wow, that's like really
Even
not
easier.
that. It's like not that. It's even. Did you come to the same conclusion? I'm like, that's really not
The
that hard.
Microsoft signing flaw, you had to understand how to, and it's like basic elliptic curve math, so not basic. But you are replacing, you're controlling the generator parameter of an elliptic curve. In Netscaler, it's like we changed some characters in a
Directory
string.
traversal, like changing
Yeah.
characters to get
Traversal.
directory traversal,
Dots
right?
are tough, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Like the Python code wasn't even really. I mean, I'm a lousy Python programmer, and I'm like, I can understand
string with
pretty
some
much
periods in it.
pretty much
Yeah.
every
String with
line of
some
that
periods
Python
in it.
program, right? And I'm like,
You
I'm a
don't even
lousy
need to know
Python
the
programmer.
file at the end of this. Like,
Yeah, you
the
just
the
dot
original POC where you're looking at the SMB config, like, you don't even have to know that anymore with all the configs. Like, this is really freaking bad. If you have any kind of Netscaler device, like from an enterprise standpoint, and like as widespread as Netscaler is and this product is in big enterprises that we've come against, like, this is a big deal. This one was actually more interesting, I think, than the Microsoft one. It was interesting that came out
was
same
it
week.
India's Project Zero was the one that released the exploit into the wild?
Yes,
Yes.
which was interesting
And
because
then-
Trusted Sec had some stuff already
And
like
so, but it-
disclosed.
Right? And if you look at, so what happened was India's Project Zero released it, and Dave was like, well, it's out in the wild, so we're going to release what we have. And then you look at the two different code bases. Like, India's Project Zero is like, basically, my assessment is what you would see in the wild by like being traded on the dark web in terms of an exploit. Trusted Sec's code was a lot more elegant and a lot more of what you would expect from actual software engineers, right? If you compare those two.
Yeah.
I'm not saying compare code to other software engineers solving extremely complex problems, right? Dave's team did a great job of constructing that exploit in a much more elegant way than
They were doing a really good job of like explaining this vulnerability properly and responsibly disclosing it and getting the full kind of write-up and or fix set up for Citrix at that point. And then when it came out and dropped, like, this was like, hey, here's some POC, we hacked this, like, go exploit it now. Like, it was actually a pretty big deal. Like, that first 24 hours from a standpoint of what you're looking at on the internet and like what you're sniffing and seeing, like, getting sent across the wire, all of a sudden it was an explosion of just people trying to figure out ways to exploit this and using that POC code.
But also, if you look at the GitHub repository from TrustedSec, there's also like, hey, if you've patched this and you want to make sure that you've patched this, here's some commands to run.
Yeah, they gave a scanner in addition to an exploit,
awesome.
right,
Which
I think is a fair thing.
Extremely responsible and very awesome.
Golf clap right here. Golf clap.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. For Dave, honestly, like that's from
Dave and his
cool
team
thing that you could use for a very long time from an NSA standpoint. Like Dave and his team, like keeping that, responsibly disclosing it, and doing the right thing at the end. Like that was a big deal.
I mean, this is like we don't see this every day, like this easily exploitable remote code execution vulnerability, basically, right?
No.
The looking at the exploit code, which is a quick read that you can do well on air, right? The exploit code is about 10 lines of Python. The logo for the ASCII art for their company is 20.
Yes.
Right.
Agreed.
And the command line argument parsing is about 40. Right. The point is, this is a single GET request.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry. My bad. Post request. Very tough. One more character.
It was a two-stage. Well, they broke it down in two stages.
2 stages.
Yeah, 2-stage. Yeah, remember.
Yeah.
So I mean, the moral of the story is like patch your shit.
So there's 70 lines of code and 60 of it is comments?
Well, I mean, the ASCII art logo is impressive. I mean,
it is impressive. I mean, if you're gonna, all right, semantics here. Like, if you're gonna release it, like, you should have some cool ASCII art in it. Like, come on. I mean, there has to be a little bit of flair. Like, what? So
I mean, NSA didn't even brand 0601.
I mean, let's go.
I know.
When you
Don't
talk
do
about
a theme song.
We could have vulnerability tattoos.
Let's talk about flair.
Logos.
Go back to when Back Orifice 2K was released at DEF CON 6, and there was, I think it was DEF CON
6 or 7?
DEF CON 6 was Back Orifice, DEF CON 7 was Back Orifice 2K. There's some blurry lines in there, but that I haven't fully researched. There is a video.
Go watch it. Go watch it.
What's awesome is in the book that I was listening to the CDC that my middle son had picked out, right? They talk about Grandmaster Rete, right?
Yeah.
He comes on in the book describing this in an audio book too, and he's got the white fur chaps with the white fur coat with the big gold chain, and he's standing up on the table chanting to the crowd like CDC rocks, like the whole chant.
It was a stage production. Like they had face melting guitar solos, and they had to get there.
Mudge was playing guitar
the night before to set up all the audio gear.
Mudge like destroyed a guitar like a rock star on stage at DEF CON. Like, talk about flair. Like, we can't lose some of that. Like, so to your point with the ASCII, like, we can't lose some of that flair. Like, I was like, wow, I kind of like lost sight of some of the flair. That and certainly if you go back, and it was
go big or go home.
It was Deviant that like dug up the video, and there was lots of people like Jason Scott and Jeff Moss that were like, yeah, what happened to that video? There is video of
I've seen it. It's
of
amazing.
CDC like doing it. And it's like, it's a really kind of, in my opinion, monumental moment in hacker history.
And we wondered,
we can't lose sight of.
We wonder why it took so long for folks to take us seriously.
Right. But that Larry brings up a great point. It is a great point.
But that's
I think we can
so
maintain
much fun.
One of the ways, to Ryan's point, we can maintain that spirit is cool ASCII art in our exploits.
It's the least we can do.
It's the least we can do.
Right.
To maintain
stabilizing an exploit on ASLR takes a long time.
It
I mean,
does.
not that long.
And if you're going to do that,
but
have
enough
some
to
cool
do
ASCII art,
right? There's programs that automatically make it.
Sure.
It's the least we can do.
Include that in your exploit.
Yeah,
we currently have our online fact checker. BO2K, according to Lee, was July 10th, 1999 at DEF CON 7.
DEF CON 7, and it was DEF CON 6 that was original Back Orifice.
So this is like all the political debates. We have a real-time fact checker.
That's awesome. Thank you, Lee.
Awesome.
Thank you, Lee.
My pleasure.
Speaking of facts, I'm out of scotch. The guy that doesn't drink scotch.
You want more, don't
so you didn't mind it, huh?
No, it was fantastic.
It's an excellent selection.
I'm going to get some more scotch while you guys talk about Cable Haunt. Because we again, there's so much news we can't. I know
I'll
we're
go
going
grab scotch for you guys.
Okay, thank you. We're going over on time, and I know this, but we have to. And admittedly, I'm at fault here for going kind of off the rails and talking about stuff. But we have to talk about 200 million cable modems.
at least 200 million cable modems in Europe. Maybe others. The attack surface leaves some to be explored given how things are going. Effectively, what Cable Hunt gives the attacker remote code execution on the cable modem. The first stop on upstream to the internet for many households and businesses.
And more so is it Europe?
Particularly in the release from the Cable Hunt folks, they are saying there's 200 million potentially affected cable modems in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Is there more potentially? Because that's where they focused their stuff, at least initially.
Right. And they were looking after the Sagem-Com Fast 3890 modem.
Yep.
One that was prevalent in Europe, as opposed to some of the stuff that might be over here. But I bet there's the same guts in them.
And based on our conversation earlier about IoT, does any of this stuff get reused across multiple manufacturers?
No, but wait.
And is it binary blob for specific chipsets? And
I love how Tyler's drinking from a flask right now, which is just awesome. He thought that wasn't going to get caught on camera, but I saw him. So a buffer overflow in the Spectrum Analyzer, which the article describes as a small server that detects interference and other connectivity problems in a host of modems from various makers. Does that mean in the cable modems there is a software-based Spectrum Analyzer?
Yes.
That's looking at the spectrum coming in from the coax cable connection?
Yep.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's
and we talk about reuse of code across multiple manufacturers for specific chipsets. Could there be more? I would say yes. But based on what they were able to do once they had access was lots of fun stuff. Disable ISP firmware upgrade.
But as we established, though, once you gain a foothold into an embedded device like this, typically similar to a lot of the container configs I see online, right? You've got root. And what's interesting is fixing that problem may sound trivial, like don't be root, right? I've seen build systems that have read security documents and recommendations and go, we shouldn't be running as root. In their build system, it breaks certain builds in their build system. So I saw an instance where basically the Docker container was spun up, then they dropped privileges down. When you go to deploy that to something like Elastic Beanstalk, it can't write to the volumes to execute their entry point.sh in this instance, and the build fails because they didn't regression test. And I want to call them out because I haven't contacted the project, right?
But now you have.
But
I haven't called them out, but not a name.
I haven't said the name, but I saw that this week, and I was like, I give them props for trying to secure their system, because when you're building a container or an embedded system, the default running state, if it doesn't need to be root, it shouldn't be root, right? Like that's just giving away privileges when you don't need to, and it's essentially the exact same thing, right? You can almost think of it as a container as a small running embedded system, right? Yeah. Different in that the container is running on top of a kernel. An embedded system, it has full access to the kernel in the sense it's running not in a container, but
go ahead.
It's the same thing, right? Don't give up root where you don't have to. Does this process need to run as root?
Yeah. So ultimately,
maybe in this case it does.
Thinking about what they were able to do with these cable modems once they got there, this device is now between you and your internet, whether it be at your home, through your business. In thinking about some of the list of attacks here, change default DNS server. We know how bad that goes. Yeah. Conduct remote man-in-the-middle attacks, hot swap code, or even the entire firmware. Disable ISP firmware upgrade, so prevent the ISPs from even fixing potentially some of these issues.
I mean, once you root on an embedded system, I'm like, all bets are off, right? Like most of the protections, unless they're embedded in the hardware, right? Jeff and Ryan are pretty much,
This is why we look at hardware root of trusts on these systems. That's why that adds the security layer that can be, or even chip-provided memory protections can provide some, although those can be circumvented.
And the DNS attack has been available, that's since the beginning of time, since we've had routers with embedded
Home
systems that
gateways,
provide.
yeah.
I mean, DNSs. I remember years, probably 10 plus years ago, looking at where they looked at the banking systems in Mexico and then looked at the cable modems being deployed to customers of an ISP in Mexico, and then basically poisoned the firmware so that the DNS for those banks resolved to an attacker's address and were stealing people's financial details. I mean, this is going on even long before 10 years ago, and here we are still today in 2020 talking about that style of attack.
And Lee had a comment in there.
To the DOCSIS 3 vulnerabilities and stuff, though. This is outside of your firewall, so your ability to control outside of what manufacturer or cable modem you pick, and based on your provider, that may not even be an option. So this is outside of your firewall and your control as far as what you're getting or receiving from the internet.
But Tyler, you should have
a big deal, right?
You should have taken Larry's advice, and all our listeners and hosts on the show, you should have taken Larry's advice. Larry's like, call your cable provider. Here in Rhode Island, we're limited to 2 options, right?
There was one Cox Communication and
Verizon.
Fios.
And I'm like, Larry, I got Verizon Fios. He's like, dude, you can call them. They'll come out, and they won't be happy about it, but basically they'll give you an Ethernet handoff.
Yep.
And the guy came out, and I'm like, dude, I want an Ethernet handoff. And he's like going through his thing, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, I've been doing this a long time. I appreciate what you do. I'm like, I've done networking and security for a really long time. If you give me an Ethernet handoff, I'm going to be your best customer, and I'm not going to bug you ever again. It's going to be awesome. They gave me an Ethernet handoff, and I don't. And he's like, well, you still need to get channel information and blah, blah, blah. Fast forward to today. I mean, you can pay YouTube. Say what you will about YouTube. Their YouTube TV is $48 a month. It gives you all the TV that you need. I don't need my cable provider's TV anymore. When life is good, I've got an Ethernet handoff. I don't need your crappy cable modem that has tons of vulnerabilities. So here you give me a handoff into my firewall.
This is what we did.
And you just put your firewall in place that has all the vulnerabilities.
So this is what in PFSense, which I never update, which is really
don't update it. I hear it may break.
So same scenario, but we still use a set-top boxes, and we need the channel information. And the guy's like, okay, well, we're going to take this crappy Action Tech and we're going to put it Ethernet to here. And I'm like, no.
You're
going to take my firewall. He's like, but you need this to provide Mocha to the over the cable. I'm like,
I'll put it behind my firewall.
We'll put it back here. We'll plug the WAN into here. And he's like, how does this even work? And it was when we were building our house, and I
let me adore my wizard hat and robe, and I'll show you.
And he's like, I just took these networking classes, and I don't understand how this works. I literally drew the guy a diagram on a scrap piece of plywood with a Sharpie.
Yes. I did that today.
Did you send the plywood home with him?
I really don't want that. I want to bring your fiber connection straight to my switch. From my switch, I'll distribute that, and you're going to give me a /29, right? He's like, wait, you know what a slash is? And I'm like, /29, right? Unless you want to do a /28, we can negotiate.
So what do you have layer 3 on your switch that you're taking a fiber handoff from your provider?
Yes.
Oh, that is
Idaho must be a nice place.
I'm turned on right now. That's so nerdy. Tyler, that's awesome.
Yep. All right, so backing up a little bit, Lee had some comments in there that I want to make sure we capture.
So one of the misnomers that I had for a long time is I thought the cable modem was like a diskless computer. It always boated whatever the provider provided. And it's like, no. It just checks for an update. It'll boot what's loaded if it's not an update. And it's like, wait, hold it.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Well, there's some interesting tech on there too, Lee. Basically what they call a cable card is basically a smart card to descramble the cable, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and are those still a thing? I know when I was in California,
they are.
Our cable provider was trying to get rid of them, trying to phase them out in favor of the set-top boxes.
Well, that's I think that
my current provider supports them.
Yeah, cable providers hate people like us because I'm like, I just want my smart card. I just want a card, and they're like, no, you need a. I'm like, no, I have a device. It comes from a company called Silicon Dust, and I just need to put it in their system, and then they send RTSP streams out to the rest of my network and distribute it to whatever TV is running the app or whatever device is running the app connected to a TV. And they're just blown away by that. And I don't know what it was, but it ended up being an automated thing where you have to call this number that I had to research for my cable provider. And you're like, I want my smart card to be on this device. And you had to re-authenticate your smart card to be in this device. And I did it. And it still works today. It's really cool.
That's I think about that.
HD Home Run is the product from silicon dusted, but I'm going to cancel that.
And I think about that, and I'm like, damn, not that long ago, my mom had all new cable boxes put in her house, and they're sitting in the back of my truck right now.
Yes.
Because I haven't. What's that?
Fun night ahead.
Maybe.
But
I have to return them because I don't want to pay the $300 a month for a cable plan, right?
To speak to this vulnerability, don't have a cable. Get the Ethernet handoff
if you can.
Plug it in if you can. Plug it in your firewall. You don't need anything from your TV is totally on the internet today. I mean, you've got Disney Plus, Hulu, Netflix.
But it's not about TV. It's about internet.
Right. It's about internet.
Right.
It's about the added services. So when you look at the service providers right now, they're not just providing internet and
they want
cable
home
TV.
security in
they're
cameras.
Home security in cameras.
You guys have probably found tons of vulnerabilities in, right?
I think there's a difference now between an ISP where many of us here may just want an Ethernet drop that sends us out to the internet and we can control what we want from that. But a lot of people out there, they want everything integrated, and they want their smart home and everything else.
Just give me that one thing that works.
But I think if they do that securely, and this vulnerability shows that largely they're not, right? But if they do that securely, it's interesting to your point, Jeff. The ISPs could greatly improve the security of most consumers' internet connections and devices.
They could.
If they provided a secure service to say, look, we know there's all of these IoT devices out there. Let us come in, give you a connection to the internet. Let us provide a more secure cable modem than in this case, right? We're also going to give you doorbells and cameras and a smart home. We're going to help you secure that. If they could do that securely, that would greatly improve the state of IoT.
I agree.
And
when you look at the recent vulnerabilities in things like video doorbells, a lot of those are credential stuffing attacks, right?
Yeah,
People reusing passwords and things. So, frankly, I might trust the ISPs a little more to manage that at scale.
Better than individual companies starting up bringing a new IoT device.
But their track record is atrocious, unfortunately.
Right.
I mean, the cable modem. I did a presentation years ago, right? Almost 10 years ago, where I was like, well, you can use Shodan and say this cable modem provider in this country is using this particular type of device that has this vulnerability, and basically go own that country, right? And you can just march through the cable modem providing ISPs in that country and say they're providing this device that has this vulnerability, and I can own all of those, right? It was I think embedded device security to take over the world was the name of my talk, right?
Sounds about right.
A good talk.
Yeah.
I like the title.
All right.
What else do we have?
Paul, I think you need to pick one.
Anything else you want to cover?
Are we missing anything significant? Let's see.
A lot of things on the list this week.
Yeah, there are. We never managed to catch them all. Just like
Pokemon.
We
were talking about NPM before.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I think that's a good one to close out the show on. Now, Microsoft is warning that NPM packages are vulnerable, which I thought was interesting.
And it's specifically one, right? Which in this case, was apparently not widely utilized by, all 32 downloads. But Microsoft's vulnerability research team is like, hey, listen, it's grabbing your environment variables and etc hosts. Okay, it's probably not great. Also, why are you installing this? But apparently only works on Unix. You think you could at least put in the effort if you're writing an NPM malware package to at least work on multiple OSs.
Or work in JavaScript, the native language, right? And be platform independent.
Which I think they cited in this same article you put on the wiki, right? That there was an NPM cryptocurrency mining or wallet one, right? A while
There's
ago.
lots of them.
Yeah, it's funny, I think back in, what was it, like 2018 or so, I filed a CV along with a team of that I was leading, actually targeting Microsoft's cryptographic library that was in NPM. And it's funny, links back to 0601 because it was a elliptic curve cryptography issue. And, the question is like, well, how many people have used this? And NPM stats, it was a lot more than 32. I forget what the number was. But NPM packages continue to be a source of issues.
So NPM, and I'm not sure when they introduced this feature, but if you, like I did, build a container that includes NPM, NPM, when you start installing packages, it tells you in the screen. Now, being a security researcher, I'm like, yeah, like NPM tells you hey, I'm installing all these packages, and guess what? You have 243 vulnerabilities. I'm like, well,
that's it?
That's concerning.
Nah, that's fine. There's only
seems
50
legit.
high.
I feel like I need to research those, and I started researching them, and then I stumbled across an article that was from a professor, nonetheless. Hopefully he's teaching his students better, right? This is, you know what? You don't really need to worry about these vulnerabilities. And I'm like, no, you know what? I'm worried about these vulnerabilities, and your article is not helping me address these vulnerabilities, because it says right in the output that you read when your container is building that NPM found these vulnerabilities, and you can run NPM audit like -- fix and fix them. But if you do that, it could break a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, well, here we go. Yeah, here we go down the, like the software development life cycle, right? Yeah. You know, security life cycle of software. And I'm like, that's really bad. Like,
I'm sure everyone using NPM has comprehensive unit tests, so it shouldn't be an issue, right? They'd immediately detect if they broke them.
I just threw up in my mouth a little.
Well, I'm sorry for that, because it's an excellent scotch you provided, so really I'm sorry to ruin that.
I think you need to refill his glass.
Or you're welcome.
Yeah, we can pass this over. Just pass it down the line.
We need a lot more scotch to talk about software composition analysis and how we solve that
I think
problem.
so. Like NPM audit, right? Despite whatever issues, is a great tool. We want more platforms that use that. A lot of new platforms are putting that out as an integrated thing. You don't have to buy an additional package. It's built into the ecosystem. And yeah, whether those vulnerabilities are real or not, whether they're exploitable in your code or not, we're making it very easy for a developer to fix it. We've won. Or we've at least
are they easy? I think easy to fix is really dependent on the environment that you're in, right? And each one of those requires research. And now Git's doing the same thing. Git will tell you in my Python libraries, they were like, well, you've got all these heinous vulnerabilities.
They purchased the
and
I forget the name of the
someone, right? But I track some of them down, and I'm like, yeah, that's a vulnerability, but I'm not really using like that aspect of the library, so the likelihood that I'm actually vulnerable to this is really low, except every time I produce a build, Git's telling me you've got vulnerabilities. I'm like, so I'll fix those just to like make that go away because it's annoying, right? But there's still a lot of issues there in terms of just identifying and prioritizing those vulnerabilities is a thing, but then also how do
precise.
The ones that but the ones that concern me are the ones that don't get flagged, that Git or NPM or any commercial or open source vendor saying like there's a vulnerability. The ones that concern me are the ones that I'm including that are backdoored. No one knows they're backdoored, and there's no vulnerabilities and no CVEs associated with them, but I'm including them. And oh, by the way, they're stealing my private keys and sending them off to somewhere in Ukraine or Russia or whatever, right? Like those are the ones that concern me. And how do we detect those at a much higher rate than we are today? Because I think we're not detecting those at a high enough rate today.
No. And
we're lost in the noise. We're lost in the, I've got to run NPM audit and NPM fix, and I got to address the ones that Git is telling me about, and that's distracting me from, I'm including this other open source library where the original developer has abandoned the project. Him or her has passed it off to someone else that has taken it over, and that person's malicious and has built a backdoor into it. And now it's in my enterprise software.
And it's a widely deployed package.
And that's what concerns me.
Yeah, I think that, and when we look at building tools to do like audits and analysis of binary or source code or whatever, right? I think like, yes, we have to do the SCA stuff. We have to alert to CVEs. And frankly, that's like a small amount of what we need to be paying attention to. And so we write a lot of program analysis tooling, and Sophia on our team, who's well-renowned and focuses on this all the time, way more than I ever will, focuses on like how can we write tools to find these common vulnerabilities. Not common vulnerabilities that are enumerated, common vulnerabilities that are latent in code that we can find by encoding sort of the knowledge of a security researcher into something that we can scale.
And that's hard. I don't think we should dismiss it. I think it is difficult to review the source code of every library that you're including and determine whether it's malicious or not, because there are so many ways. Like, and you go back to Perl, right? There's like over a dozen different ways to implement the same functionality. So determining whether that's just a functional difference or whether it's something malicious gets difficult. What I've proposed to folks working on this issue is if I include a library, does that library require external access? Because at the end of the day, the attacker needs to collect information, but they need to extract that. So when I include a library for analyzing image files, does that library need access to external? Does it need to connect to another host on the internet? If we could somehow separate that, and that's going to vary based on language and framework greatly, right? And even your own application. But if I can isolate that, libraries I'm importing don't need access to connect out to the internet, that could be a great way to really kind of raise the bar for attackers attacking these libraries.
Now we need a privilege level more than root and not root, and moreover, we need a privilege level that actually differentiates between the main executable and a library called from it.
Right. It's a
which
trust.
Is not today's architecture.
How do I trust libraries that, well, this is one that I developed, and this library I trust, and this library should have access to the internet to connect to someone else's API, versus a library I'm importing from a third party that should never have access to the internet? That's also really hard. It turns out that's really probably just as hard as it is to analyze the source code of all the libraries or the
binary, which is usually what we're working from, because to your point earlier, the binary blobs, right?
Right. Yeah.
But
that addresses an open source issue.
We know what's actually running. We know the machine code that the 50 versions of Perl compiled down to, right? Or not in the Perl case, but other languages. So yeah, it's a blessing and a curse to be working in.
But that's an open source issue too, right? Because analyzing a binary blob versus source is different. Open source proponents, it's interesting, I presented at an open source conference and talked about binary blobs. And like literally people were standing and clapping where I was like, we should get away from binary blobs being included in things like embedded devices. And they loved that idea because you can review the source code and see what it's doing versus trying to reverse engineer that binary blob.
If the source code's written in a way that doesn't hide the vulnerability.
Nah, that's the crux of it.
I actually want to go back to something you said a minute ago, Paul. And that was, you were talking about, should libraries be connecting to XYZ at all? Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how many of us even are watching for that? And you could extrapolate beyond just source code. You could get into, IoT or appliances. Do they need to talk to these other services? Or are people even at a point where we're paying attention?
Well, yeah, of course they do, because that makes it the internet part of the Internet of Things.
Right, but then we get into the buzzword of zero trust, right? Which is very much a buzzword, but it's applicable, and I know it's a buzzword, but it's applicable to this situation. How do I trust binaries and or libraries? I need to drink now because I said zero trust. How do I apply a level of trust to libraries and or binaries I'm including and differentiate that I trust this library
Hey, Mr. Zero Trust.
Connect to the internet, right?
How do you trust your iPhone cable charger? I'm just saying, or your HDMI cable for that matter. Like, this zero trust model is becoming a big deal. And going back to your point of all of the sources of all of our hardware chips and or the ability to analyze those.
But I can totally trust my cable because I bought the cheapest one from Amazon, and they came in like a 5-pack.
Yes.
And it came with a little some characters that you couldn't quite read in the return shipping address.
Because it came in 2 days, that means it's not from China, and you're good.
But you know what? Tyler, to your point, what's interesting? I used to have the X-Files poster that was trust no one, right? And I think that we could extrapolate that today to trust nothing. But I think
you have to trust something because your phone has to get charged.
That's why you don't use the phone.
I want to even take that a step further.
That's why you do wireless charging, Tyler. Come on now.
Well, I do.
But Tyler, to your point, I want to take that to the next level and say we should verify and then trust. Right.
Yes.
And I think those are the security models.
That should be a T-shirt, Paul.
I think a president a while ago said trust but verify, right?
Right, but it should be verify then trust.
It's backwards.
Yes,
it's backwards. We need to verify and then trust. That applies to social engineering, right? When you're calling users on the phone in your pen test, and if they're trusting and then verifying, that's bad. Like,
I think we learned from 0601 that you should start running the code, and then have the certificate validation check it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why you said opposite. My bad.
Verify and then trust. I think addresses a lot, but it addresses a lot of the issues that we have today.
Yeah.
It does, but it's gonna get more and more difficult. Like looking forward, I don't know how. Like looking at my Ethernet cables that I'm plugging in that I'm buying on Amazon or monoprice. Like, how do we verify Ethernet cables? How do we verify our USB cables we're plugging our phone to? How do we
It's
verify
just one of the
all these things
reasons
that
I
have
love
chips,
Tyler.
microcontrollers, HDMI? Like, how
Like
does this,
that tinfoil hat goes right down to like I gotta validate the Ethernet cables I'm buying
everything
too.
from
That's
that-
my bad
awesome.
USB is bad,
That's
man. It's
awesome.
a bad USB.
to even DARPA is focusing on the same issue, right? So whatever, we'll give Tyler a hard time for the tinfoil hat, but like this is a very valid issue. DARPA has active programs looking at how do we validate for the commercial industry what's being brought in and plugged into systems because it's a concern for everyone.
Or more importantly, how do we validate? But maybe this is the NSA updating their toolchain.
Yeah, I mean, look at Hack5. Hack5 has an HDMI toolkit. Bad USB, it can execute code remotely from a wireless range. Like, literally, this is already a valid and widespread attack vector.
I think a future segment, Tyler, is HDMI. The functionality being built into HDMI. When I've got some of the later equipment, newest
the NSA
equipment,
CIA leaks already had it. Like Vault 7 had that paper that's been commercialized for the NSA since 2008. So, like, we've been working on that for a while, but they'd already done it. Like, that's got to tell you where we're at.
HDMI is one thing, but the reality is that the attack surface of everything we use is growing, right? We're plugging into more places, we're traveling to more places, we're connected to more things, right? Yep. And so ultimately, it is how do we understand the components that we're using, whether it's open source software, whether it's things we've developed, whether it's things we buy. Where do they connect to? What do they reach? And doing the analysis on that to understand
how do we verify all of this?
I'm relying on you, man. Like, we're going back to like
working on it.
It's on you. You tell me if this is good or not, and I'll tear everything apart in my lab. But I'm relying on you for everything else.
I totally plugged my laptop into the HDMI in the hotel the hotel TV in Singapore.
I'll send you a charger. Don't worry about
it. Good. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming on this segment, and this was awesome, by the way. Both segments was a lot of fun, and our listeners are going to probably have the longest Paul Security Weekly episode in history, because coming up next is our panel discussion on hacker culture.
For 2 hours. Oh, I got to do something?
Over and hacker culture.
Over and get to hacker culture for 2 hours. And then...